There's something to be said for the idea of tediousness as a game mechanic. It's not easy to pull off correctly, and if we're being honest, there are already far too many games out there that are tedious without being that way on purpose, so to be perfectly frank, it's a difficult concept to market. But when brilliant game design uses difficult concepts like the long slog of lateral thinking and brainy introspection in an effective way, you've got something truly special on your hands. Lucas Pope might be one of the most insightful and creative game designers out there right now. 5 years after the release of his thoroughly frustrating and amazing Papers, Please, he's continued his legacy of unorthodox and thought-provoking games with adventure puzzler Return of the Obra Dinn. Set in the early 1800s on a ghost ship that has been discovered 6 years after its disappearance, you play an insurance adjuster who must go on board the ship and investigate using a magic pocket watch to find out every detail you can about the ship and the crew's fate. This involves using the watch to travel back in time to a specific moment that led to the death of a crew member. Frozen in time, you must take in every detail possible in order to puzzle out who each member is, how they disappeared, and who done it. There are dozens of crew members to learn about, everyone from the captain to the lowliest sailor, and the answers aren't just cut and dry for you to input. A ton of your research will require assumption, deduction, and lateral thinking, and even then you'll be second-guessing yourself right up until the game confirms your suspicions. This is one of the only games in the past decade that has required me to pull out a pen and paper to take notes on, and I highly recommend you do the same. As you progress, you'll find yourself stuck, and those notes are going to be very helpful as you revisit certain scenes, read over the crew list again, and just dig for every detail you can find. As the puzzles get harder, those details are what make the difference. A crewman's nationality, marital status, family, job, all of those will factor in to identifying them. And if that sounds ridiculously frustrating, that's because it is. Return of the Obra Dinn is not a relaxing, sit back and enjoy yourself sort of puzzle game. It requires a lot of attention to detail and the same slow, thoughtful consideration that Pope's Papers, Please required. Having said all of that intimidating crap, it's also important to point out here that this might be one of the greatest puzzle games ever made, and one of the best examples of story through gameplay that I've ever seen. Because the puzzles aren't just frustrating, they're clever and inventive in a way that's sort of amazing. You have everything you need by the end of the game to identify each crew member and their respective fates. And unraveling that is just so satisfying. When you put the pieces together correctly, you feel like an unsung genius, and it fuels your desire to stitch together the next section of that tapestry. As you do so, you learn more and more about the story of the Obra Dinn and its crew, a story that's told entirely out of order, but in a fashion that is sort of perfect. Almost all of the game is a flashback, and it jumps from one moment to the next in a truly masterful way. One second the crew is fighting off unreal monstrosities, and the next they're arguing among themselves about a card game. It's got wonderful pacing, and it's a master class in how video games can tell a story in a way that no other medium can. The visuals themselves are really old school, harkening back to a time when gloppy, monochromatic graphics were all one could really look forward to. And on one hand, these are pretty smart. Being a bit of a one-man army, Lucas Pope knows that he doesn't have time for graphics that will compete with the AAA market, nor does he need them. So instead, he uses a stylized retro theme that does the job and even obscures some of the creepier aspects of the game, in the same way that movies like Jaws were so successfully frightening by keeping the shark off camera due to lacking the technology. Faces and details are sometimes difficult to make out, and it only adds to the intrigue. I will admit, however, that this particular style was a touch grating for me. In a game that was already so challenging that I would have occasional headaches, the visual didn't always help that factor. Return of the Obra Dinn is not for everyone. People who prefer fast-paced games or only enjoy puzzles insofar as Tomb Raider can provide might not just dislike this game, they might actively loathe it. But if you're a puzzle and strategy fanatic who's been waiting around for the next great game, this is it. It's the sort of polarizing experience that's going to see a lot of zeros and a lot of Game of the Years. This, I believe, is all the proof we need that Lucas Pope is going to be in the video game history books as someone who pushed the craft forward. Papers, Please proved that games can be more than just what we see as traditionally fun, and Return of the Obra Dinn is a storytelling puzzle masterpiece. Lucas Pope is an insane genius, and we're just lucky that he's on the side of good, creating games instead of kidnapping people and forcing them to take part in ironic, Saw-style puzzles made out of piano wire and Rubik's Cubes.
If Daddy don't sink a little drinky, Daddy gets sad and blue. Sneak a little drinky, sneakity-doo. Sneak a little drinky past you. Sneak a little drinky, sneakity-doo. Sneak a little drinky past you.